California sunlight pours across the abandoned threshold, splashing onto a herringbone floor that remembers expensive shoes and muddy boots alike. On the hallway mirror, a wide semicircle has been wiped clean of dust, exactly the circumference of a trail boss's Stetson brim. That silent half-moon of polish is, perhaps, the last autograph of Ward Bond, the gravel-voiced guardian millions invited into their living rooms each Thursday night on Wagon Train. Wardell Edwin Bond started life so far from Beverly Hills that the local doctor arrived by horse. Benkelman, Nebraska was a fly speck at the edge of nowhere, just 2 muddy streets and a depot where cattle cars rumbled through at dusk. The Bond family lived in a clapboard rectangle with no insulation and a porch too narrow for daydreams. Yet the boy grew tall and broad-shouldered inside those thin walls, absorbing prairie values the way floorboards absorb winter chill. He learned early that a house is less about rooms than about refuge. When wind howled across the plains, his mother packed newspaper into the window gaps and told her children to trust the walls. Ward never forgot that lesson. It became the silent contract he later forged with every structure he owned. Protect me, and I will protect everyone under your roof. When he was 16, the Bonds loaded their belongings into a rattling Model T and aimed for California. The stucco bungalows of downtown Glendale looked to Ward like palaces. Soon the lanky farm kid, now pushing 6'2", bruised his knuckles on the University of Southern California's football field. His best friend on that gridiron was another Hulk named Marion Morrison, who would later answer to John Wayne. Tackling dummies and locker room benches shaped Ward's taste more than design magazines ever could. He craved rooms wide enough to stretch in, doors that never squeaked under heavy shoulders, and foundations that felt as unshakable as a goal line stand. He had entered the age of Art Deco movie palaces, but inside his ribcage he still needed Nebraska heft. Early Hollywood offered him apartments, boxy, plaster-walled studios that echoed with neighbor quarrels and trolley clang. Ward ricocheted through leases the way bit players ricocheted through uncredited roles, one every 6 months. Then came the war years and hotel rooms that smelled of mothballs and hurried heartbreak. By 1944, signing another month-to-month felt like spiritual homelessness. His friends were buying estates. He was still hanging his shirts in closets that rattled. He swore he would own just one home in his life, but that home would clasp him like a linebacker in a goal line pileup and never let go. The opportunity arrived suddenly on a rainy Tuesday in December. Laird Kriegar, a gifted, troubled actor only 31, had died in the operating room. Kriegar's Spanish Revival villa in the Beverly Hills canyons went on the market quietly. Studio executives whispered that it was cursed by ambition cut short. Ward Bond ignored superstition. He toured the property at dawn, walking from Slate Courtyard to Bougainvillea strangled balcony, and felt the walls breathe like a sturdy horse. By noon he had written a check for the full asking price, plus a handshake promise to preserve its quirks. He took possession before the wallpaper had time to mourn its first owner. Cherokee Lane was not a palace by Hollywood standards, barely 4,800 square feet, but Bond was never chasing square footage. He wanted density. He wanted emotion baked into plaster and red clay tile. The gravel drive curled beneath pepper trees, their feathery branches whispering like extras on a back lot. He installed a wrought iron gate, heavy and unadorned, that clanged shut with the finality of a jail door. Crossing that threshold felt less like entering a home than like stepping into a fort in the Mojave. Guests later joked that Ward's security system was simply all the metal in North America welded into one hinge. Inside, a foyer swam in amber light. Spanish paver tile cooled bare feet, even on July afternoons. Bond loved the way the grout lines framed each footprint like entries in a diary. Straight ahead, 3 bowed arches opened into a cavernous great room whose ceiling soared 25 feet. Most owners of such a room commissioned chandeliers. Bond left it naked. He said he preferred to see rafters the way God hung them. He did, however, widen the central archway by exactly 6 inches, the first of many architectural edits driven by physicality rather than style. After he clipped his shoulder on the plaster during move-in day, he announced, "Either the wall moves or I do, and I'm too old to keep relocating." To the right of the great room lay the den, and there the house truly became autobiography. Knotty pine paneling marched floor to ceiling, broken only by shelves jammed with dime store westerns, USC, yearbooks, and the occasional Shakespeare play. Mary Lou insisted on sneaking in. Centered on the back wall was a gun cabinet glazed with thick beveled glass. Winchester rifles leaned beside Colt revolvers, used as props in half a dozen John Ford pictures. Bond mounted his tarnished Rose Bowl medal above the display. He liked reminding visitors that before he was a cowboy, he was a lineman. The fireplace demanded attention, an arched monster of local riverstone, wide enough to park a Harley-Davidson inside. On winter nights, he stacked cottonwood logs like railroad ties, stoking flames so high they singed the lintel. Robert Horton, who played Flint McCullough on Wagon Train, once timed the blaze. Sparks crackled for 6 straight hours without a second piece of kindling. Mary Lou May Bond, former secretary, forever confidant, claimed a softer territory across the hall. Their formal dining room began as Kregar's music room. She draped it in sage linen and hung lace shears that diffused afternoon sun like organza. Yet Bond's imprint bled through the elegance. Over the sideboard, Mary Lou hung an oil painting of Ward's childhood home. Peeling white clapboard, a solitary windmill, nothing more. Dinner guests found themselves chewing filet mignon while staring at a Nebraska shack. The juxtaposition gave the room electric poignancy. Bond would nod toward the painting and say, "If you forget where you're from, this house will spit you out." No one argued. The kitchen, however, belonged to him alone. He tore out Kregar's dainty breakfast nook and extended the steel prep counters to replicates he had seen on naval ships. Cast iron pans hung from a horseshoe-shaped rack, each seasoned black as canyon midnight. He cooked steak directly on the iron, salt and pepper only, flipping with bare fingers. A transistor radio on the sill never left the AM country station, static and all. When producers called during dinner, Mary Lou answered and repeated her husband's standing line, "Ward says beef's on. He'll call you at sunrise." Up a broad staircase of Honduran mahogany, the hallway branched into bedrooms that revealed quieter layers of the man. The master suite's walls were painted a surprising robin's egg blue. Ward had discovered, during a bruising television schedule, that color therapy helped his insomnia. Blackout curtains sealed the room from morning glare, and beneath them Mary Lou tucked heavy wool blankets, no matter the season. Nebraska habits die obstinate deaths. On Ward's nightstand stood a single-frame photograph, himself in police uniform from It's a Wonderful Life. He called it the honest man picture. Its presence puzzled many, but to Bond, it captured the one role in which he believed he'd exposed his core, steady, kind, invisible, until needed. Another door opened to a guest room wardrobe legend. Bond insisted on triple reinforcing its closet rod because his dear friend John Wayne, whenever in town, insisted on hanging half a dozen dusters and 2 elk hide coats that weighed nearly as much as the Duke himself. Wayne once bragged, "Only 2 closets in Los Angeles can hold my wardrobe, my own and Ward's." The comment delighted Bond so much that he carved Duke's armory into the baseboard with a pocket knife. Yet the most whispered about space was not a room at all, but a vault. Halfway down the upstairs hall, Bond installed a fireproof chamber with walls poured from cement rated to survive a direct hit by a bomber. The studio financed half the construction because inside he stored film canisters of every picture he had shot, including work prints and dailies the public never saw. He called it the Trail Chest. 3 journals sat on a shelf above the reels, each leather-bound and titled Trail Notes. Ward scribbled in them after night shoots, chain-smoking camels while the city slept. Mary Lou never opened them. She said her husband feared losing a line of dialogue more than his bankroll. After his sudden death in 1960, the journals vanished. Rumor says a producer borrowed them to research a memorial documentary and forgot to return them. Another theory claims Ward himself torched them in the fireplace one sleepless dawn, fearing that raw honesty could wound those he loved. The truth remains locked in ash or attic. Beyond the French doors, a tiered courtyard sloped toward chaparral. Many Beverly Hills homeowners planted obsessive lawns that drank more water than the Colorado River. Bond's backyard, in contrast, surrendered to the chaparral's silver-green sprawl. He sowed drought-friendly sage and gave the hillside permission to look untamed. Neighbors griped to zoning boards. Bond shrugged. I'd rather host deer than roses. At dusk, mule deer indeed tiptoed among the yucca, and Bond stood silent at the balcony rail, cigar ember pulsing like a campfire coal, watching their silhouettes fade into a violet horizon. Thursday nights in that courtyard became legend during the peak wagon train seasons, shooting usually wrapped by 5 p.m. Cast and crew would caravan into the canyon, headlights bouncing off eucalyptus trunks. Inside the gate, they found string lights overhead, mesquite benches ringing a portable grill, and Ward Bond wearing an apron embroidered with 2 words, "Circle Up." The rules for the gathering were firm. First, no talk of ratings. Second, no gossip about other productions. Third, no guest left hungry or nursing a half-empty glass. Singer Frankie Lane once attended and caught Ward pouring bourbon for a young grip whose hands shook from nerves. When Lane teased Bond about corrupting minors, Ward barked, "He spent 12 hours holding a boom in the sun. He's a man tonight." That sentence cemented the party's ethos. Inside these walls, hierarchy dissolved. Stories from those evenings echo like harmonica riffs across studio folklore. One night, John Wayne bet Ward $50 he could rope the courtyard fountain from the balcony. He missed, shattering a clay urn. Wayne shrugged, tossed cash to Bond, and whispered, "Buy another urn, or a cow, whatever fits the rope." Another evening, Cary Grant dropped by, impossibly elegant in a dinner jacket. Half an hour later, he had shed the jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and was flipping burgers beside Ward, grease spattering a shirt worth more than a production assistant's yearly wage. A photographer present, one of those tireless stringers hoping for a scoop, lifted her camera to capture the moment. Bond blocked the lens with his palm and murmured, "Tonight is private." The shutter never clicked. Privacy, in fact, became the house's dominant religion. Studio messengers attempting to deliver rewrites found themselves facing the wrought iron gate like penitents before a monastery door. If the script could wait, it waited. Inside, life unfolded at a slower narrative tempo, a tempo that balanced out 15-hour days on dusty backlots. Mary Lou often likened the villa to a wagon circle. Once the gate latched, predators prowled outside but never entered. Bond's need for sanctuary explains an otherwise puzzling investment he made in 1956, a 320-acre ranch in Kern County. Unlike movie star ranches bristling with tennis courts and guest houses, Bond's spread contained only a weather-beaten barn and a single wide trailer painted army green. He spent maybe a dozen weekends a year there. A pickup track looped through sagebrush to a ridge with a view of snow, tipped Sierra peaks. Friends who joined him recall that he never talked business on the ridge. He just breathed, counted hawks, and sometimes practiced lines into the wind. The ranch offered a minimalist horizon that the canyon house hemmed by eucalyptus could not. The two properties formed a diptych, one a fortress of memory, the other a field of possibility. Back at Cherokee Lane, small rituals tethered the couple to reality. Every morning at 5, before leaving for set, Ward brewed cowboy coffee on the stove, grounds swirling like black galaxies in the pot. He filled a thermos for himself and another for the still sleepy driver waiting outside. On days off, he rose even earlier, sitting at the den desk to answer fan letters by hand. Mary Lou kept the envelopes in neat rows, each stamped with zip codes spanning every time zone in the country. She believed answering those letters was Ward's true devotion, bigger than football, bigger than acting. Perhaps that is why she could never sell the house after he died. The unthinkable came on November 5th, 1960, in a Dallas hotel bathroom. A heart attack, sudden and absolute, felled him between shaving strokes. Newspapers wrote that his last words were a mild complaint about the mirror fogging up. Production on Wagon Train halted mid-season. Scripts were rewritten overnight to memorialize a character whose life stretched far beyond any camera crane. Back home, Mary Lou left the porch light burning. For weeks she expected to see his Ford convertible crest the hill at dusk, dust haloing its taillights. Studio heads sent condolences. Neighbors brought casseroles. Yet the house itself provided the only real comfort, the walls holding grief the way they once held laughter. Time blurred details. Ivy crawled across stucco. Singers of a new era replaced Bond on syndication schedules. By the early 1970s, the villa stood empty, escrow lines snarled by Mary Lou's reluctance and real estate hounds' greed. Urban explorers cracked a side window and filmed grainy Super 8 reels of dust motes, whirling in the great room. They found the den almost intact, rose bowl metal tarnished, typewriter ribbon dried like an abandoned spiderweb. In the basement, they discovered film canisters fused into opaque spirals, celluloid surrendered to vinegar decay. Strangest of all, they reported an unlabeled trunk containing nothing but cowboy boots, lined heel to toe, each pair worn through on the right side, a testament to Bond's habit of bracing himself against imaginary prairie wind while delivering dialogue. Mary Lou eventually remarried and moved south, but she never cleared the Cherokee Lane title. She passed away in 1988 after a tragic bedroom fire in Vista, and with her went the last legal key. Since then, the villa has existed in a limbo of looming auctions and withdrawn offers. A tech entrepreneur once tried to raise it, only to be thwarted by preservationists citing cultural memory. From Mulholland Drive, the rooftop looks like a chess piece left in a forgotten game. Yet on windy nights, neighbors swear the porch lantern flickers. Faulty wiring, maybe, or the stubborn pilot light of legacy refusing to die. Stand in the foyer long enough and wind will push the screen door against its frame with a thud like a cue to roll camera. Close your eyes, and footsteps echo down the hall. Heavy, deliberate, a lineman's cadence. Then that wide-brimmed hat pauses at the mirror, wipes a neat arc through dust, and disappears into the heart of the house. In that instant, the abandoned villa ceases to be a relic. It becomes what it always was, the last campsite of a man who spent a lifetime guiding make-believe wagon trains safely home and who finally, in the hills above Los Angeles, built a circle of his own, strong enough to weather every storm except time itself. And that's all for today's video. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up, let us know your thoughts in the comments section, and subscribe so you won't miss out on future uploads. See you next time.